Her father looked up from his drink and muttered, "She canceled a painting that cost thousands." Across the table, her brother didn't flinch. "You told her there was no seat." The room fell silent. The kind of silence that doesn't end when the conversation does. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The cold stung Emily's cheeks the moment she stepped off the porch, but she welcomed it. It felt honest, unlike the warmth inside. Fabricated, selective, conditional. She walked slowly toward her car, each step crunching across the frost-hardened driveway, the sound sharp and brittle, echoing louder than it should have. Her hand trembled only slightly as she opened the driver's side door, but it wasn't from the cold, not entirely. She sat, engine off, coat still open, and let her breath fog the windshield. There was no screaming, no dramatic tears, just a dull ringing in her ears, as though her body were processing grief on a delay. Her fingers finally moved, reaching for her phone in her purse. She scrolled past the group chat with college friends, past the unopened message from her stepmother, "Bring white wine if you can," until she reached the thread with the artist. The final invoice sat unopened. She tapped it, looked at the image. The painting was perfect. A snow-dusted farmhouse beneath a dusky pink sky. The porch light on. Curtains drawn back just enough to suggest warmth inside. It looked like a place where a father waited by the door for his daughter to arrive. A lie in brushstrokes. She typed the message in one motion, swift and final. "Cancel delivery. I won't be needing it." The artist replied within minutes, too fast, as if they'd sensed something breaking. "Are you sure? It's ready for morning." Emily stared at the reply, then deleted it without answering. The car was silent again, save for the occasional thrum of distant wind. She leaned back and looked at the roof. As a child, she'd memorized the pattern of their ceiling tiles. She used to count them to fall asleep, to escape the way her father's disappointment filled a room like fog. Even then, he had always loved her best when she was easy, smiling, helpful, quiet. The older she grew, the more complicated her grief became. The less space there was at the table. But this, tonight, wasn't sadness. Not really. It was recognition. She started the car, not to flee, but to choose. To drive toward the version of herself who no longer waited for an invitation that would never come. A seat was denied, but she still had the wheel. The house was too quiet after the call ended. Her father stood in the hallway for a moment, the phone still in his hand, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like a low accusation. He placed it back on the receiver with careful precision, as if it might shatter. In the next room, the leftovers from Christmas dinner sat half-wrapped on the counter. The scent of reheated ham and cinnamon had already gone cold, like a memory overstaying its welcome. He walked to the den. The fireplace was still glowing, a log crackling now and then like an echo of laughter that had long since died out. He reached for his drink and took a sip, expecting warmth and getting bitterness. On the side table lay a printed email, his reminder to confirm the delivery address for Emily's gift. It was dated 2 weeks earlier, her name at the top. Framed oil on canvas, 36 by 24. He had been proud. Told Susan she'd come around eventually, that she still cared enough to remember what mattered. But he hadn't checked again. Now the painting would never arrive. And worse, he understood why. He walked over to the living room cabinet and opened the bottom drawer where the photo albums were kept. Not the new, curated ones Susan liked to show guests, but the old albums with creased spines and sticky plastic pages. He flipped through one. Emily at age 10 holding a sparkler in the yard. Her mother's arm around her. A July sky behind them, hazy with light. There had never been a seat missing at that table. He felt it then. Not regret. That was too clean, too tidy. But erosion. something elemental giving way inside him. Not a collapse, but a quiet shift, like beams creaking before they break. Susan entered the room carrying a wine glass and paused in the doorway. "Everything okay?" He didn't answer, just nodded and closed the album. But he didn't put it away. Later that night, when she went to bed and the house settled into its performative stillness, he sat in his study and opened the email from the artist, the one Emily hadn't deleted. The image loaded slowly on the screen, and when it appeared, he couldn't look away, because it was everything he hadn't said, and everything she no longer needed to. It wasn't the silence that unnerved him. It was how natural it started to feel. Her father sat at the kitchen table one Saturday morning, spoon hovering over a bowl of cereal that had long since gone soggy. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching on the edges of the wine glasses still drying from the night before. The house had been full last night. Michael, Susan's bridge friends, even a neighbor couple. But not Emily. Not for weeks now. And though no one spoke her name anymore, she lingered in the air like a room that still smelled faintly of someone gone. He reached for his phone. Nothing. No missed calls. No new messages. The last thing she'd sent was an emailed receipt confirming the cancellation of the painting. She hadn't even addressed it to him. It had just arrived, unannounced, like a document quietly sliding across a courtroom bench. Susan entered the kitchen in her slippers, phone in hand, scanning headlines. "Cousin Rachel unfriended me on Facebook," she muttered, almost amused. "She hasn't answered my texts either," he said, voice dry. Susan's eyes flicked up, guarded. "You think Emily said something?" "I think she didn't have to." Later that week, at Michael's birthday dinner, the topic finally surfaced. Not from guilt, but from the weight of its absence. He brought it up between bites of cake, voice rough from too much wine. "She canceled a painting that cost thousands," he said to no one in particular. Michael didn't flinch. "You told her not to come to Christmas." "I didn't tell her not to come." "You told her there was no seat." The words hit like cold water. The room went still. Susan reached for her wine, smile brittle. "Let's not." "No," Michael interrupted, tone sharper than expected. "Let's." For the rest of the evening, conversation stumbled, then dissolved. And when they finally left, her father stood alone in the dining room, staring at the chair Emily used to claim without asking. The emptiness wasn't just absence, it was indictment. A quiet, unrelenting consequence. Not rage, not rebellion, just a final, devastating clarity. Emily had stopped waiting to be wanted, and everyone could feel it. The call ended, and for a while, Emily sat with the stillness that followed, an unspoken echo pressing gently against the walls of her small apartment. The window beside her was cracked open just enough to let in the early notes of spring, the faint warble of a bird, the scent of damp earth, the fragile warmth of sun still fighting through March air. She didn't move, didn't cry. There was nothing left to wring out of this grief. It had passed through her like weather, and now she was standing in the calm after it. She looked at the painting. It hung opposite the table she'd picked up secondhand and sanded herself. The edges of the canvas caught light at a soft angle, her father's childhood home rendered in soft oils, the front porch bathed in dusk, lamplight glowing in a window like someone had left it on just for her. But this version had a small detail the original commission hadn't. On the porch was a figure, mid-stride, turning inward. A man, older, blurred at the edges, caught between stepping out and staying in. He was not heroic or central, just present. That was the one she had kept. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Emily stood and crossed the room, running her fingers along the wood trim of the frame. It was smooth, hand-finished, crafted with care. She had paid extra for that, not out of indulgence, but intention. Because some stories, even painful ones, deserved to be honored. Behind her, the kettle hissed faintly on the stove. She made tea like she always did, jasmine, a splash of milk, 1 sugar. She sat at her table, her hands wrapped around the warm ceramic, and let herself feel nothing dramatic. Just the grounding comfort of knowing she had made it through. Her phone buzzed once. A text from a friend, a weekend hike. She smiled and typed, "I'm in." And just like that, the space her father once occupied in her life settled into something smaller, manageable. Not erased, not resented, just placed. There was a time when his voice could shake her, when his words, even careless ones, could pull her back into rooms where she'd never been allowed to speak. But now she built her own rooms, her own table. And this time she knew exactly who belonged.